Well, let's return to one of our top stories now. The riots in the US city of Baltimore. A state of emergency has been declared there after a night of violent clashes, looting and burning buildings. The protests follow the funeral of a black man, Freddie Gray, who died after being injured while in police custody. And as a result, all eyes are now on the police as they try to contain the violence and enforce an evening curfew. Well, let's get more on that story. And joining us live is Michael Matthews, a British police officer. He spent time with his American counterparts, and you've just written a book about it, haven't you, Michael, called We Are the Cops. What is happening in the US now? We've seen a number of incidents over the last few months, and we see the extraordinary pictures from Baltimore last night. What's going on?
Lots of things are changing in America. Attitudes towards policing are changing dramatically in America and have been over the last few years. I've been going there now for 12 years with lots of different police departments across the country, and I've seen it myself. Whereas once upon a time, police officers in America were seen really as pillars in the community. They were very well respected. But I've seen the shift where people are starting to challenge the police, speak out against the police. Young people especially are starting to fear the police less. And I think some of that has to do with social media. People are videoing everything now. You look at the LA riots, the Rodney King riots, one grainy video footage was sent around the world, and look at the results of that. But now everyone has a camera, so everything's being filmed. And police officers are being filmed, arresting somebody, that is uploaded, shared everywhere, and it may be a 30-second clip, but you're not seeing what happened before, what happened afterwards. So police officers are being judged very quickly, when really they're just doing the job they've always done. But I think attitudes towards them within the American communities are changing.
A lack of respect, which I suppose a lot of people would echo in lots of different countries, wouldn't they, including the UK, saying that the youth don't seem to respect the police as much as they have done. But when you look at what's happened in Baltimore overnight, this change and it's turned into widespread looting, is that to do with gangs or is that simply to do with the protesters?
I think there's a very, very difficult relationship in the States between the gangs and the police, as you can imagine. The gangs are quite powerful in certain cities, LA, Chicago, Detroit and Baltimore. And they're seeing this as, really, I imagine, as a reason to go out and fight the police. Just yesterday, the Baltimore police issued a statement to their officers saying that the gangs are joining forces to take out police officers. It's a very, very dangerous situation. And the gangs and the police are really at war, and always have been.
It then develops a vicious cycle where the police are trying to clamp down on the situation, but equally being accused of being heavy-handed. How hard is it for them to tread that line?
It's extremely difficult, and at the forefront of the police officers in America are firearms. There's guns everywhere, as we know. So, as well as dealing with the looting, the throwing of bottles and bricks, the protesting, in amongst that, they know there will be people who are armed with guns, and there's a very, very real danger that they could be shot. And that's also the gangs are joining forces and threatening to take out officers.
Indeed, our correspondent Dominic Waghorn is out there. He saw somebody carrying a submachine gun just on the streets last night. It wasn't a police officer, it was one of the looters. It's an incredibly dangerous place to be anyway, isn't it, in some of these parts of Baltimore? What needs to change?
I think the police and the public and the politicians do need to get together and have a real good talk. But some of the issues are much deeper than that. The gang issues have been going on for decades now, and it can't be changed overnight. But I think a lot of the community, the student groups, and the police officers do need to speak because, as I say, attitudes, especially young people, are changing towards the police. I think the police need to catch up to that, need to realise actually they're not as respected for whatever reason as they used to be. And I think a lot of police officers are struggling to understand that, struggling to understand why people are challenging more than they ever used to. And again, I think it's down to social media. People are talking a lot more, sharing things a lot more, getting together to create groups. But really, it's just dialogue. But the gangs, it's a long-standing problem. It can't be changed overnight.
How different is it being a police officer on a normal beat, somewhere like Baltimore, than it would be being a police officer, say, here in Sheffield?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of police departments in this country, but obviously there are big differences. Big one being guns. I spend a lot of time with police in America, and the fear of guns is always at the forefront. Whenever you go to any incident or any call, you're always thinking, is there going to be a gun there? Will someone just suddenly start shooting us? And at the moment, police officers are being targeted and ambushed, being called to an incident in America. They turn up, and it's really just an ambush to get them. So these sort of things, we don't have, you don't have these problems in the UK, and it does come down to the amount of guns, pure and simple. So police officers are always at fear of being shot in America.
To operate your job day in, day out, with the constant low-lying fear that you may be shot, that you may be killed at any point, it's an enormous stress for anybody to operate under, isn't it? But you look at some of the incidents that have happened over the last few months in America, and do you think the police have been at fault in a lot of these incidents?
I don't think so. I think they're just doing the job they've always done. They've always operated like this. They've always worked like this. Police officers in America are very, very good at their job. They're very professional. They're not racist. They're not violent. They are decent people. But things do happen. People have been shot. The police actually kill and shoot hundreds of people every year in America. But likewise, hundreds of police officers are killed every year in America. So there is a war going on there between the criminals and the police.
It does seem, from an outsider, when you look at the footage, and as you say, everything is filmed these days, that there does seem to be American police do seem to be a great deal more aggressive than British police. You hear the language that's used, the shouting that happens, and you see police arresting people here in the UK, and it is very different. I mean, is that simply down to the guns factor, or is it that they do have a slightly more vicious persona, I suppose?
I think that's a cultural thing as well. The American culture is a lot more loud. I wouldn't say aggressive, but just the way they are, and also the training. You look at the American police training, it does tend to veer towards the excitement factor, the flashing blue lights, the gun calls, and so people join the police looking for that excitement, when in fact most police work is mundane and can be boring. I don't think they're particularly aggressive, but in certain cities like LA, Detroit and Baltimore, I think the police are on high guard, and they need to be. When you've got gangs who are joining forces saying they're going to take out police officers, you can't go in there being weak. You have to be a little bit hard to deal with them.
So where do you think the responsibility lies in changing the situation? Do the police need to change the way they operate, perhaps set a different example? Or how do you change social media? How do you change the rest of society?
I think social media should change. I mean, there are changes happening at the moment. Police in America are now being issued with body cameras, which I think is a great thing. Police officers may at first be against it, but I think they're going to find that having body cameras really helps their cause and their cases to show what they actually deal with every day, and that it's not just a 30-second video clip that someone's put online to attack the police, but here's the whole incident, here's what the police officers are dealing with day in, day out. It's an incredibly dangerous job, and parts of America and certain cities are incredibly dangerous places to work in. As many police officers in the last 10 years have been killed in America than soldiers were killed in Afghanistan. It's that dangerous.
Fascinating to talk to you, Michael Matthews, a British police officer who spent a lot of the last 12 years moving across the ocean between us and America and talking about the differences between both systems. Thank you very much for joining us.